Several requests have come in just for a bit of help on one of the smaller issues that is fairly easily fixed. So we'll do a quick recording now. Question often comes up when you select an item out of a drop-down list. Of course, there's only two pieces of information supplied in the select list, the internal value and then, for lack of a better word, the display text. But what if you want to retrieve and show additional information about the selected item that isn't available just in those two things? Well, that's easily done with a tiny bit of Ajax. So I'll just stop running here. I'm going to bring up two things. I'll need to work in my patient's controller. Sorry again, this isn't the richest example to use, but it does get the point across. So maybe I'll work with a create view initially here. Okay. So working down to the bottom, here's where we have our drop-down list, and that's perfectly good. Everything is working fine. But, we only have, as I said, the two pieces of information, the doctor's the ID, and then their full name is, or formal name as is being displayed. So if we want to grab additional information, for now I'm just going to have this little span here to show it called About Doctor, and that will give me the opportunity to actually see that. Sorry, that's just so I can display something in addition about the doctor, right? Okay, so that's going to be the plan is when we select a doctor out of the list, we'll show some extra information. So, there's a few simple ways we could do that, but if all we want is a string, right, just some textual information to display in addition, then we can do that with a very simple Ajax request, okay? So we'll just come down here, do a little bit of paste magic, and so really what we're talking about is the change event of our dropdown. Doctor ID is the actual dropdown list. And so what we're doing here is a function then to grab that event. I'm grabbing the value. That's the ID of the selected doctor, building a little URL. So it'll be my patient's controller, get a doctor string, and then slash and the actual ID of the doctor as a route value, right? Then, as I said, simple Ajax request to the URL, and we'll just get the response text back again. And then all I have to do is put that response text inside my span, identified with this jQuery selector for my span that we just added a minute ago. So that's it in the client. Now I just have to go to the controller, patient's controller, and we'll add that method. So again, to emphasize, this is the simplest approach if all you need, if all you absolutely have to have is a little bit of text, right? So then we can just have a method that returns a simple string. Yes, it doesn't have to be an active result. And you saw this way back when you were first doing the initial tutorial on MVC, right? That we can just simply return a string. So here I am, I get my ID. If it has value, then we'll actually do the query. Otherwise, I just say no doctor found, or maybe I should say no doctor selected or something. That's probably more appropriate. Okay, so link query, now I'm doing all my includes, so I have all the information about regions and countries. You can imagine in a more complex situation, you could be pulling all kinds of information from the database, right? Once I have that doctor object, all I'm doing in this case is returning a string. I'm just building the string up with the full name, a dash, the region name, of course, taking advantage of the objects inside the doctor, the region object and country object and so on that I included in the link query. So I have all the information available, but it's still a simple string and that's all we have to do. So back here, we'll just get that string as a response text and display it up here in my little span. Let's just see how that works. Okay, so here I am on the create page. So the beauty is I guess select a doctor and then the query goes and pulls all the information, region and so on and so forth. And away we go. I can pick different doctors. Of course, if I go back to select a doctor, then I get that text because I didn't have an ID matching a record, so no doctor selected. And that's a fairly simple implementation, right? So once again, if all you need is text, that's easily done with a straightforward little Ajax request. But we have a rich interface available with JSON objects, right? A rich approach, I should say. So, rather than just simple text, that's fine for certain things. But if we need multiple separate pieces of information, why not actually just request and get an object, right? And JSON is the ideal way to pass objects around, as we've seen and discussed before. So I'm going to, just for variety, I'll do this in the edit view instead. So coming down here, I'm going to do the same kind of thing. Maybe I'll start off with just a span again. So I could just throw it here. Actually, I'll copy and paste my little span tag. out of here, stick it down here, I suppose. This will do for now for the demo. I'll be taking it out in a few minutes anyway, right? But this time I'm actually going to go and pull a little bit more information. Okay, we want to get an entire JSON object so that we have multiple properties at once. Okay, in one go, we can have multiple separate pieces of information. Yeah, sure, we could parse information out of a big long string, but that's just as silly when we can get it separately to begin with. So what is it going to look like? Well, similar approach, right? The drop-down list, the ID is Doctor ID, the change event. Now, just because we might, if you were on that same page, like the create page, you might have a value, I should say, that doesn't return a record. So I just want to make sure we empty it first, just before we go on. And then again, pull the value of the selected item in the drop-down list, build my exact same URL, except I'm going to call a slightly different method, just select a doctor or get a doctor. And this time we're doing get JSON instead of just Ajax request. Okay, our URL, and asynchronously then it will return our data when we get it back. We can just make sure it's not null or an empty object, and that way we know that our data will have values. Now, I can pull then multiple separate values, maybe the full name, the region, and the country out of the doctor, concatenate it together, and it'll look pretty much the same as what we just had, but we know that it's pulling separate pieces of information. Now, in order for this to work, we have to come back to our controller and add a slightly different method, right? So maybe just come right below this one, and we'll get this one in place. This next method is slightly different. Notice we're returning, or it's an action result instead of just a string, right? And actually, we're going to return JSON. Now, this is a similar line of code to what we used before when we returned our actual select list as JSON. Again, the beauty of JSON is it can be a simple object. It's just a single name value pair, anything right up through a complex hierarchical object with child collections. And of course, you can have a collection of objects with their own collections and so on. Doesn't matter. It's all JSON, right? So if we have a value, so we were passed an ID, we'll do our link query, right? And then I'm going to use an anonymous object here because one of the things, this is great, and it would be super if we could just do our query, get our doctor object, and come down here and use it here, right? But that won't work because when we convert it to JSON, we'll run into the same serialization issue we had seen before with our navigation properties we use for Entity Framework, right? The parent here, like for example, the region has many doctors, same thing with country, of course. And of course, there's that collection inside region of doctors, and inside doctor, there's the region. So you get that circle going back and forth in serialization, and it doesn't like that, right? So one of the ways it's easy to get around serialization, circular serialization like that is a data transfer object. And again, here's where JSON is just wonderful. We don't have to worry about creating a class. We can just use an anonymous object. So I'm just creating a new object, just calling it doc, and all I have to do is specify the particular properties I'm interested in. If I don't care about other ones, I don't have to include everything from the doctor class, right? Actually, because I've already done the query, I can even just actually pull the full name and formal name, right? And then maybe I'll just grab the country and region. So these would be the four properties: full name, formal name, country, and region, that are all available in my new anonymous object that I return with JSON. And that's basically it. So coming back to our edit view, right? That's why I can just grab my data that's returned and grab full name, region, and country out of it. All right, let's see if this works. Of course, I'll have to get an error first because I didn't specify a route value. Bad request, but if I actually supply a route value now, it should work. I think number 4 is a valid record. And yes, there we go. So I can pick a doctor and see we're getting almost the exact same effect. And that's good. It looks good. It's working just fine. So the difference is we're actually getting separate pieces of information and building it together, right? That's okay. But you know what? Since we have separate information, why not show it separately? So what I'm going to do is take out this span, right? I don't need that anymore because I'm actually going to make it look like data entry values, even though you won't be able to enter anything because I'll set them to read only. So I got three form groups, just hard-coded labels here, just using the same classes so they fit in with the rest. Doctor's full name, doctor's region, doctor's country. And I have input type equals text, okay, with a proper class so it looks like it matches the rest. The ID about doctor, doc region, and doc country all set to read only. Okay, so I just have to make a little bit of a change to my actual script here. I'll just copy and paste my new version. We can talk about the differences. Right. First of all, I'm emptying all three just to be safe. Then we have the exact same query, but what I'm doing then is I'm supplying values, because remember, these are text type inputs now. So it's not .text, it's .val for value. And then separately, I'll put in the full name, the region, and the country in the three different ones, right? Okay, so let's just see how, oh, yeah, about doctor. Yeah, I'm right. So let's just go one more time. I'll get that error message, but I'll skip that. So here we go. Maybe that looks a little bit better, maybe a little bit more professional. And when I choose a doctor, all three pieces of information get entered separately, right? So I can, there's a lot of them are all in Ontario, Canada. Okay, I only have one that isn't, but that's okay. All right, so you see the effect. So if that's the kind of thing you're after, it should be easy to follow the code example, and I've got the code posted up in Blackboard already. So have fun.